Here on the QC Step podcast, we talk a lot about how to get a job. Well, on this week's episode, we're going to talk about how to leave a job for a better opportunity. It's the week of February 23rd through the 27th, and this is the QC Step podcast. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the QC Step podcast. I'm Corey Finneran. A few weeks ago, I asked each of your classes to send in questions for us to discuss here on the podcast, and they just keep coming in, and we'll get through all of them. Last week, I talked about absences from work. Two students submitted the same topic last week, students from different schools. And this week's topic was again submitted by two students from two different schools. And that means that you should not hesitate to ask questions because other students have those same questions that you do. I'll say that out of the dozen or so questions that I have received that have been submitted, there's not a bad question in there, and they all serve their purpose. After I read them, I honestly thought, oh yeah, that's a good idea. I don't know why I didn't think about talking about that. So you know what employment issues and questions you have and that you're facing better than anybody else. So keep sending them in, and if they start piling up, then we'll just do two each episode. So for this week's topic, a student from Mercer County High School asks, how do you professionally leave a job when you have a better opportunity? And a student from Moline High School asks, how do you inform your boss that you plan to quit because you found a new job? Well, this is a really good problem to have. So this week, we're talking about how to leave a job for a better opportunity or a new job. If you're thinking about leaving your job for any other reason, maybe you don't like the job, maybe you feel like you're not getting enough hours, or any other reasons like that, that's a completely different topic. If you're thinking about leaving a job for one of those reasons, I would encourage you to talk with Gary or Carrie about your situation. Finding a job is not easy, and I would encourage you to not leave a job before you have another one lined up. But let's say you do have another one lined up. How do you leave your existing job for this new position? Well, that's what we're going to talk about this week. If you go back to episode number 53, it's titled, Should You Leave Your Job for a Different Position? In that episode, I talk about 3 things to consider in deciding whether you should stay with your original job or leave for a new position. In that episode, I also suggest trying to work both jobs for a few weeks to make a more informed decision on what job you would like to keep. You can find the link to that episode in the notes underneath the video of this episode on qcstep.com. So you've decided to leave the job, and like these students ask, how do you professionally leave the job that you're in? Well, the first thing that you should do is something really that you should do ahead of time. A lot of times on applications or in the interview, they will ask when you can start the job. If you're leaving a job, it's important to leave that work experience on good terms. So you will want to turn in your 2 weeks notice to the job that you currently have. Even if it's for a better opportunity, if you leave a job and you don't give a 2 weeks notice, that could tarnish the time that you spent with that business. If you leave them hanging and you quit that job with no notice, they're probably not going to have very nice things to say about you when a future potential employer calls them to check on your references and your previous employment. So you will absolutely want to tell your new job that you won't be able to start until you have finished the last 2 weeks with your current employer, unless that new employer would like to write your schedule around your existing job. Like I talked about in episode number 53, that will give you some time to try out this new job. If you're able to start your new job as you work your last 2 weeks with your original job, and it turns out that you really don't like the new job and you would rather stay where you were, I would assume that your original boss would allow you to retract your 2 weeks notice. So let's backtrack a bit, back to the point where you need to tell your boss that you're turning in your 2 weeks notice. You will want to turn in your 2 weeks notice to the store manager or the store director. You won't want to tell just a shift manager, but go to the big boss. What you'll want to do in this conversation is thank them for the opportunity to work for them. Tell them that you would like to turn in your 2 weeks notice and that you've accepted another job because it is a better fit for your employment goals. So you could say something like this. I wanted to talk with you to let you know that I'm turning in my 2 weeks notice. I have accepted a position with another business. I've really enjoyed working here, but this new position is just a better match for me and my career goals. I really appreciate the opportunity that you gave me by hiring me and allowing me to develop my skills here. I think if you're in high school and you're working a part-time job and you present this situation to your current boss like that little scenario, then I think that they will appreciate the fact that you're turning in 2 weeks notice and not just ditching your job and putting them in a bind and your coworkers in a bind. They'll probably ask you some questions, about your new job, and when that conversation ends or sometime in the next 2 weeks, you will want to ask that boss for a letter of recommendation for any future jobs that you apply for, or you could just ask them if you could use them as a reference. When you start working your first job, most of the time it's meant to be an experience to help you get to the next step. And if you handle this situation like I described, you will have, as the student from Mercer County says, professionally left the job for a better opportunity. I mentioned that I had covered a similar topic in episode number 53. This is our 81st episode, and we've covered about 80 different employment topics on our podcast. You can look through the list of topics to see if we've covered any employment questions that you might have by going to the right side of our website and clicking on the image for episode list. And there's also an icon there that says Master Application. And if you click on that, it will take you to a master application that you can print off. You can fill it out, and then you can use it to fill out real job applications. There's an icon that says Interview Episodes, and if you click on that, it will take you to a page that displays all of the episodes that are about job interviews and interviewing. The fourth icon says employer interviews, and there you will find some interviews that I've done with hiring managers of businesses right here in the Quad Cities. If you would like email notifications when these podcast episodes are posted, you can join the mailing list. Just enter your name and email address right here and then click submit. Thank you for watching and listening, and I will be back next week with yet another student-submitted topic on the QC Step podcast.